At the annual Met Gala-style charity auction, I wore the exact same bespoke tuxedo as my fiancé's personal assistant. Chase stood across from me, a smug, barely suppressed snicker pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, Lucas," he whispered, loud enough for the nearby photographers to catch. "You're supposed to be a man of pedigree. Why on earth are you wearing a knockoff? And a cheap, bargain bin replica at that?" Cassandra, my fiancée, stared at me with unmasked disgust. "Your attire is utterly embarrassing tonight, Lucas. Chase, you'll be my escort for the evening." I stood perfectly still under the flashing lights of the ballroom. I knew my best friend, who had gifted me the suit, would never buy a fake. He'd spent months coordinating with a legendary Savile Row designer to get it made. There was only one logical explanation. A thief had entered my home. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned away from Cassandra and walked toward the quietest corner of the ballroom, where her older sister sat alone in a polished titanium wheelchair. "Tonight," I said, offering a slight bow, "I would be honored to be your escort." In our world, the arrangement was absolute. A man of the Mercer family had to marry a woman of the Langford dynasty to secure the generational trust. But the contract never specified which Langford daughter. Beatrice Langford had lost the bitter family power struggle to her younger sister, Cassandra, only because a devastating car accident 6 months ago had left her paralyzed from the waist down. What the Langfords didn't know was that I possessed a legacy of my own. Beyond my family's declining real estate empire, I was the sole practitioner of a rare, near-mythical school of neuroregeneration, a lineage of precision microacupuncture known in whispered high society circles as the Weaver. I had restored movement to patients on the brink of total paralysis. A pair of damaged legs was nothing more than a puzzle waiting to be solved. 3 months into my engagement with Cassandra, my prospective father-in-law had insisted we attend this high-profile charity gala together to present a united front to the Wall Street press. Before we left, my future in-laws had repeatedly lectured me about looking presentable, desperate to ensure I didn't tarnish the pristine Langford brand. By chance, the event fell on my birthday. My closest friend, Toby, had surprised me with a custom-tailored, bespoke tuxedo. I had hoped to step into the grand ballroom and finally feel like I belonged in this glittering, superficial world. Instead, the moment I walked through the heavy mahogany doors of the Plaza Hotel, I saw him. Chase, Cassandra's 24-year-old personal assistant, was wearing the exact same midnight blue tuxedo with silk file lapels. We were identical. Except we weren't. As I approached him, my eyes locked onto the drape of his jacket. It was flawless. The fabric had a liquid sheen, the stitching invisible. Then I looked down at my own lapels. The fabric was stiff, the cut slightly off, the lining cheap polyester. Mine was a blatant, embarrassing imitation. Chase covered his mouth, letting out a soft, theatrical giggle. "Honestly, Lucas, you have a family name to uphold. How could you show up in a replica that looks like it was bought off a discount rack?" He adjusted his cuffs, making sure the diamonds on his links caught the light. "An event this important and you dress like this? It's a slap in the face to Cassandra." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a toxic purr. "If you couldn't afford a real custom piece, you should have just asked. I'm sure Cassandra would have bought you something passable." I ignored the bait. "Where did you get that suit, Chase?" "Cassandra bought it for me, of course," he said, puffing out his chest. "She was terrified I'd look as provincial as you, so she had it imported." He emphasized the word provincial with a sickening, triumphant grin. Cassandra stepped up beside him, her expression hardening the moment she saw me. "Did you take my suit, Cassandra?" I asked quietly. Her face flushed with immediate outrage. "Lucas, watch your tongue. It's a tuxedo. Do you honestly think I can't afford to buy one for my staff?" This specific tuxedo was handcrafted by a master tailor in London. "It is a one-of-a-kind piece," I replied, my voice steady. "Toby pulled every favor he had to secure it for my birthday. If the real one is on your assistant's back, then someone took it from my closet and replaced it with this trash." Cassandra let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You are being utterly ridiculous. I am a Langford. Why would I ever resort to petty theft? I didn't realize you were this pathetic, Lucas." Toby, who had just entered the ballroom, rushed over to my side. He stopped dead in his tracks, eyes darting between me and Chase. "Wait. Lucas, what is going on? That's the tuxedo I got you. Why is he wearing it? And why are you in a knockoff?" I kept my gaze fixed on my fiancée. "You'll have to ask Cassandra." "Toby," Cassandra snapped. "You bought Lucas a fake, and now you're trying to pin your cheapness on me. I have never bought a counterfeit in my life. Especially not for Lucas." Toby, furious, grabbed the hem of Chase's jacket. "This is the exact garment I picked up from the courier. Get your hands off him." With a sharp crack, Cassandra's palm struck Toby's cheek. The sound echoed in the immediate radius of the lobby. I watched Toby's cheek bloom into a violent red, and a cold, dangerous fury ignited in my chest. "Cassandra." I stepped forward, my fists clenching, but Toby grabbed my forearm, his grip tight and pleading. "Lucas, don't," he muttered, his voice shaking. "It's fine. I'm fine. Please, don't ruin things with her. We can't afford to anger the Langfords. Chase watched the interaction with a smug satisfaction he barely bothered to hide, though he quickly lowered his eyes to play the martyr. Cassandra, maybe I should just go change. I don't want to be the reason you and your fiancé have a falling out. If Lucas wants the suit so badly, he can have it. Don't waste your breath on him, Cassandra said, brushing a hand over Chase's shoulder. He's just a classless, insecure boy from a family of failing developers. He doesn't know any better. She turned her icy glare back to me. Your presence here is an embarrassment. Chase will be my guest. Don't speak to me for the rest of the night. She slipped her hand through Chase's arm, and they walked away, leaving us in the shadow of the grand staircase. I led Toby into the private holding room down the hall, waving over a server to bring us a bucket of ice. Wrapping a handful of cubes in a cloth, I gently pressed it against his swollen cheek. My chest burned with a mixture of rage and guilt. I'm going to make her pay for that, Toby. I swear to God. It's just a slap, Lucas. It'll fade by tomorrow, Toby said, trying to offer a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just don't fight her. Your dad's entire restructuring loan is dependent on this marriage. We can't fight the Langfords. She set me up, I whispered, my teeth grinding. She stole my suit to humiliate me in public, and then she laid a hand on you. I won't let this go. But Toby's words lingered, heavy and suffocating. I remembered my father sitting in his study 3 months ago, his hands trembling as he held a glass of whiskey. Lucas, the Langfords approached us. They want an alliance. They are willing to inject enough capital to save our entire portfolio and expand us nationwide. The only condition is that you marry into their family. Why us? I had asked, skeptical. New York is swimming with eligible bachelors from families 10 times wealthier than ours. Superstition. My father had sighed. Their patriarch believes in old-world cosmic alignments. An astrologer told him that the Langford dynasty will crumble in this generation, unless a daughter marries a son of the Mercer bloodline. It's foolish, but to them, it's life or death. It's absurd. I've never even met Cassandra. If you don't do this, Lucas, everything we've built for 3 generations will go into foreclosure. We'll be ruined. Looking at my father's tear-stained face, I had yielded. I had no one in my life, no great love to protect. I figured a marriage of convenience was a small price to pay to save my family. When I first met Cassandra, she seemed cold but competent. I figured we could coexist. But her infatuation with her assistant had quickly crossed the line of professional boundaries. I recalled an afternoon a month ago when I was riding in the back of Cassandra's town car. Chase was in the front passenger seat. I was nursing a severe migraine, suffocating in the stagnant air of the cabin. When I reached to roll down the window, Cassandra snapped at me. Leave it. Chase gets hot easily, and I have the climate control set perfectly for him. If you open the window, you'll ruin the air. I'm nauseous, Cassandra. I need some air. Then close your eyes and deal with it. It's a short drive. Stop being so dramatic. Before I could reply, she locked the windows from the master console. When the car finally pulled up to our destination, I stumbled out and threw up on the pavement. Instead of checking on me, Cassandra had immediately inspected the side of her car to ensure none of her pristine paintwork had been soiled. I had tolerated the disrespect because I believed it was simply the price of a transaction. But tonight, the transaction was void. The Langfords needed a Mercer to secure their legacy. But Cassandra wasn't the only Langford daughter. Leaving Toby in the lounge, I walked back into the ballroom and headed straight for the dim corner where Beatrice sat. Beatrice, I said, looking down at her. Do you have a companion tonight? She blinked, startled by my sudden presence, before glancing down at her lap. No. I usually keep to myself these days. Then tonight, I am your date. Beatrice stared at me, her brow furrowing. Aren't you engaged to my sister? I am, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. But I can easily become yours. She let out a dry, bitter laugh. You're losing your mind, Lucas. You know the terms of the family trust, I murmured, leaning down slightly. The Langford heir must marry a Mercer. Do you have no desire to reclaim your birthright? Beatrice looked down at her useless legs, the spark of fire in her eyes briefly dimmed by grief. My father will never hand the keys of the empire to a woman who cannot even stand on her own. What if I can heal you? She froze, her breath catching. What? If I make you walk again, will you have the courage to take back what belongs to you? If I hadn't survived that crash intact, Cassandra wouldn't even be in the conversation, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The throne was always meant for me. Then let's make a deal. I heal you, and you become my shield. And if you fail? Then my life is yours to dispose of. Beatrice studied my face, searching for any sign of deceit. Finding none, she leaned back, a cold, calculating smile gracing her lips. Very well, Lucas. I'll take that bet. I stepped behind her wheelchair and began pushing her toward the center of the glittering ballroom. Within seconds, Cassandra and Chase intercepted us, their faces twisted in amusement. Lucas? What on earth are you doing with my sister? Cassandra asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Since you found yourself a new escort, I figured I should do the same. So you chose the cripple? Chase chuckled softly beside her. Well, Ms. Langford, I suppose a man wearing a knockoff tuxedo belongs with a broken-down partner. It's a fitting match. Beatrice didn't flinch. She slowly looked Chase up and down, her gaze colder than ice. Interesting. Looking at the two of you, I would have assumed the fake was the one standing next to my sister. I suppose natural elegance is something you're born with, whereas certain street rats can be dressed in the finest silks and still smell of the gutter. Chase's face turned a violent shade of crimson. How dare you? He tugged on Cassandra's arm. Cassandra, your sister is humiliating me. As Cassandra opened her mouth to lash out, Beatrice raised a hand, cutting her off. What? Are you going to slap me too, Cassandra? Go ahead. Let the press have a field day with the Langford sisters brawling at a charity gala. Cassandra clenched her jaw, pulling Chase back. Forget it. We don't waste our time on charity cases. She turned her venomous gaze to me. But Lucas, you are still my fiancé. Parading around with my sister is a public insult to me. And replacing my bespoke wardrobe with cheap replicas to dress your assistant is a compliment? I retorted, stepping closer. If people laugh tonight, Cassandra, they won't laugh because I can't afford a real suit. They will laugh because the great Cassandra Langford is too cheap to dress her own fiancé properly, choosing instead to lavish her resources on her help. Cassandra's chest heaved with fury. You, what? Want to try slapping me too? I asked quietly. Furthermore, let me make one thing clear. From this moment on, I will be attending to Beatrice. I am taking over as her personal physician to repair the nerve damage in her legs. Cassandra let out a loud, mocking laugh. You? A doctor? The finest neurosurgeons in Switzerland couldn't fix her spine, and you think your little family remedies will do the trick? Western medicine has its limits, I said calmly. I practice a different art. Cassandra sneered at Beatrice. You're actually going to let this fraud touch you? Don't cry to father when he leaves you completely paralyzed. Being dead would be preferable to living under your shadow, Cassandra, Beatrice replied smoothly. Fine. But let me remind you, Lucas, if you happen to kill my sister with your little needles, my father will ensure you spend the rest of your life in a dark cell. I welcome the challenge. At that moment, Virginia, Cassandra's mother, swept into the circle, her face tight with irritation. Lucas, there you are. I have been looking for you everywhere. Why are you lingering in the corner with Beatrice instead of standing by Cassandra's side? And what in heaven's name are you wearing? Are you deliberately trying to embarrass our family? If you find me that embarrassing, Mrs. Langford, you are more than welcome to call off the engagement, I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth. No one is forcing your daughter to marry me. Without waiting for her reply, I wheeled Beatrice toward the exit. Behind us, Virginia's voice rose in a shrill screech. Did he just walk away from me? The nerve of that boy. I will ensure his father's business is ruined by morning. Cassandra's cruel laughter followed us into the night. Don't worry, mother. Let him play doctor. When he fails and kills her, father will destroy him for us. We ignored them, stepping out into the cool New York air and boarding a waiting town car. Once we arrived at Beatrice's private penthouse, I unlocked a velvet-lined rosewood box containing my family's heirloom silver needles. I looked into her eyes. Do you trust me, Beatrice? Without a single moment of hesitation, she nodded. Start. It will take 13 days, I said, gently rolling up the hem of her trousers. On the 13th day you will stand. I paused, looking at her. Your mother. She is still in a vegetative state at Mount Sinai, correct? Yes, Beatrice whispered, a shadow of profound grief crossing her face. Beatrice and Cassandra were half-sisters. 6 months ago, a brutal car crash had not only shattered Beatrice's spine but had plunged her mother, Miriam, the true matriarch of the Langford fortune, into a deep, irreversible coma. Conveniently, Virginia and Cassandra had seized control of the family estate immediately afterward. If you trust me, I said, I can wake her up too. 13 days later, the grand ballroom of the St. Regis was decorated for my formal engagement party to Cassandra. I arrived wearing a meticulously tailored, modern high-collar obsidian suit, a sharp contrast to the Western formal wear of the guests. When I entered the reception hall, I found Cassandra and Chase already holding court near the Champagne Tower. Chase was dressed in an identical obsidian suit, though his was adorned with ostentatious gold embroidery along the collar. To any outsider, it was impossible to tell which of us was the groom. Cassandra smiled mockingly as I approached. Lucas, look. Chase is acting as your best man today. Isn't that wonderful? A best man who dresses identically to the groom? I asked, my voice dry. And this is an engagement party, not a wedding. Why would I need a best man? Oh, don't be so sensitive, Cassandra dismissed with a wave of her hand. It looks festive. Stop being so incredibly petty. I'm not petty at all, I replied, a slow smile gracing my lips. In fact, I don't care what he wears. Because I'm not the one getting engaged to you today. Cassandra's smile faltered. What are you talking about? If you aren't marrying me, who else would you marry? Beatrice. Exactly. I stepped back as the double doors of the ballroom swung open. I wheeled Beatrice directly toward her father, Robert Langford, who was standing with a group of major shareholders. Mr. Langford, I announced, my voice echoing across the silent hall. I am ready to fulfill the Mercer alliance. But the woman I am marrying is Beatrice. Cassandra rushed forward, her face contorting with rage. Are you insane? Beatrice is a useless cripple. She can't inherit the firm, and she certainly can't lead this family. Who says Beatrice is a cripple? I asked. Before the eyes of the city's elite, Beatrice placed her hands on the armrests of her chair. With slow, deliberate grace, she rose to her feet. At that exact second, Robert's personal assistant burst through the doors, pale and breathless. Sir. Mr. Langford. Your wife. Miriam has just woken up. The heavy crystal glass in Robert Langford's hand slipped, shattering against the polished marble floor. Dom Perignon pulled around his Italian leather shoes. But he didn't even look down. His eyes, along with those of 300 of New York's most influential elite, were pinned on Beatrice. She stood upright, tall and immaculate in a gown of midnight blue silk. Her posture was regal, unaffected by 6 months of dark confinement in a titanium frame. Beside her, Lucas stood with one hand lightly resting behind her waist, a steady anchor, his expression as calm as a frozen lake. Beatrice. Robert breathed, his voice cracking. You're standing. I am, father, Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the dead silence of the St. Regis ballroom. She took one step forward. Then another. Her heels clicked. With sharp, rhythmic authority against the marble. And my legs are not the only things that have recovered. Cassandra's face went from flushed rage to a sickly, chalky white. She stumbled back a step, bumping into Chase, who looked like a man watching a ghost walk out of a grave. No, this is impossible. Cassandra shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at Lucas. It's a trick. She's wearing a hidden exoskeleton. He's using nerve-numbing drugs. Father, he's a fraud. He's trying to humiliate us. Silence, Cassandra. Robert barked, his face pale as he turned to his assistant. What did you just say about Miriam? Repeat it. Word for word. The young assistant, dripping with cold sweat, held up his tablet with trembling hands. The ICU chief at Mount Sinai called 30 seconds ago Mr. Langford. Mrs. Miriam Langford opened her eyes, spoke her own name, and requested her personal legal counsel. She is fully conscious. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom like a sudden gust of wind. Virginia, Cassandra's mother, let out a quiet, strangulating gasp and clutched her pearl necklace so tightly the string snapped, sending white spheres clattering across the floor. Miriam awake? But the doctors said the brain damage was permanent. The doctors spoke within the limits of their knowledge, Lucas said smoothly, stepping into the center of the hall. He adjusted his cuffs, revealing the subtle silver gleam of his family's signet ring. They saw damaged neural pathways and assumed they were dead. I saw blocked meridians and reawakened. You. Robert stared at Lucas as if seeing him for the first time. You did this for 13 days, while your younger daughter was shopping for engagement dresses and dressing her servant in my stolen clothes, Lucas said, his eyes locking onto Chase. I was restoring the true matriarch of the Langford family, and now the terms of the trust must be fulfilled. Lucas turned his gaze to Robert, his tone dropping an octave into pure, unyielding authority. The Mercer-Langford Pact dictates that a son of the Mercer bloodline must marry the rightful daughter and heir of the Langford line to secure the generational trust. For 3 months, you pushed Cassandra toward me. But Cassandra is not the heir. She never was. Lucas. Cassandra screamed, her eyes wide with desperation and malice. You signed the preliminary papers with me. You are my fiancée. You can't just switch to her. The preliminary papers were conditional upon my family's review, Lucas replied coldly. He pulled a folded parchment from his breast pocket and tossed it onto the table beside the champagne tower. And given that you publicly assaulted my best friend, stole my custom wardrobe, and paraded your assistant around as my substitute, I find you utterly unfit to carry the Mercer name. You stole his suit. Robert turned his terrifying, thunderous glare toward Cassandra and Chase. What is he talking about? Chase shrank back, trying to hide behind Cassandra, but the identical obsidian suits they were wearing made the mockery blindingly obvious. Before Cassandra could craft another lie, the heavy mahogany doors at the main entrance were pushed open once more. An elderly man with silver hair, impeccably dressed in a classic 3-piece suit, stepped into the room, accompanied by 2 uniformed NYPD officers and Toby, the The crowd parted instantly. Several fashion moguls in the audience recognized the old man immediately, Alastair Vance, the legendary master tailor of Seville Row, who famously made garments exclusively for royalty and world leaders. Mr. Mercer, Master Alastair said, bowing slightly to Lucas before turning an icy glare toward Chase. I arrived from London as fast as the jet could carry me. Thank you for coming, Master Alastair, Lucas said softly. Could you please identify the garment currently worn by that young man? Master Alastair walked over to Chase. Without asking permission, the old tailor reached out, flipped open the lapel of Chase's jacket, and examined the inner silk lining. Disgusting, Alastair spat, his voice echoing through the silent room. This is a bespoke obsidian silk tuxedo crafted by my own hands over 400 hours. Woven into the inner chest canvas with gold thread is the serial number, AV 2023-089, and the initials LM, custom made for Mr. Lucas Mercer as a birthday gift commissioned by Mr. Toby Miller. Alastair looked Chase up and down with profound disgust. The garment was reported stolen from Mr. Mercer's private residence 48 hours ago, and this street rat is wearing it. The room erupted into furious whispers. He actually stole it. Look at him. He's wearing a stolen $80,000 bespoke suit to an engagement party. And Cassandra defended him. How low can the Langfords drop? Officer, Lucas said calmly to the police beside Alastair. I wish to press charges for grand larceny against Mr. Chase Miller. The value of the stolen item exceeds $70,000. No. Wait. Chase panicked, falling to his knees as the officers stepped forward, clicking their handcuffs. Cassandra gave it to me. She had the keys to your apartment, Lucas. She brought it to me and said it was a gift. I didn't steal it. It was her. Chase, shut your mouth. Cassandra shrieked, her face turning crimson with humiliation. It was you. Chase screamed back, terrified of the impending felony charge. You said you wanted to humiliate Lucas so he would know his place. You said he was just a dog your father bought to save his business. Slap. A sharp, violent crack rang through the room. It wasn't Lucas who struck. It was Robert Langford. The patriarch's hand landed heavily across Cassandra's face, sending her crashing onto the marble floor, right beside her fallen assistant. You vile, foolish girl, Robert hissed, his voice trembling with pure rage. You humiliated our family name. You stole from your betrothed and you ruined our alliance. Cassandra clutched her bleeding lip, staring up at her father in absolute horror. Father. Officers, Robert said, turning his back on her without a shred of mercy. Take the boy away. And if my daughter was complicit in the break-in, arrest her too. Father. Cassandra wailed as the officers grabbed Chase by his arms and hauled him toward the exit. Chase was weeping hysterically, the sleeves of the stolen Seville Row suit dragging against the floor. Lucas stepped forward, placing a hand on Toby's shoulder. Toby looked at Cassandra lying on the floor, then at Lucas, a sense of quiet, profound justice finally washing over his face. Now, Beatrice said, her voice ringing out like a silver bell over the ruined party. If you will all excuse us, my mother is waiting at the hospital, and we have a kingdom to reclaim. The private VIP wing of Mount Sinai Hospital was guarded by a dozen private security personnel hired by the Mercer family. When Lucas, Beatrice, and Robert arrived, the chief of neurology was standing outside the glass doors, holding a clipboard, his eyes wide with an emotion bordering on religious awe. Mr. Langford. Mr. Mercer, the doctor stammered, pointing through the glass. It's medically inexplicable. Her brainwave activity, which was flatlined in the delta state for 6 months, spiked to full alpha-beta resonance. In less than 2 hours, the cellular inflammation around the brainstem has completely vanished. Lucas smiled faintly. He did not explain the 13 microsilver needles he had inserted along Miriam's governor vessel meridian 3 nights ago, releasing the trapped blood stasis that Western imaging couldn't even detect. They pushed open the door. Miriam Langford sat propped up against crisp white pillows. Though her face was thin from months of tube feeding, her hazel eyes were razor-sharp, burning with the cold, formidable intelligence that had once built the Langford conglomerate from the ground up. Beside her bed sat 2 senior estate attorneys and the family's chief financial officer. Mother, Beatrice whispered, rushing forward and throwing her arms around the woman. Miriam wrapped her arms around her daughter, kissing her forehead gently. My sweet girl, Miriam murmured, her voice raspy but firm. I felt your tears every time you sat by my bed, and I felt the silver needles that brought me back. Miriam looked up, her piercing gaze landing on Lucas. A soft, approving smile touched her lips. Lucas Mercer, the son of Julian Mercer. You have your grandfather's hands, and his absolute precision. Mrs. Langford, Lucas bowed his head respectfully. It is an honor to see you. Awake. Where is Virginia? Miriam asked, her tone suddenly dropping into an icy register. Robert stepped forward, looking visibly uncomfortable. Miriam, you just woke up. You need to rest. Virginia and Cassandra are dealing with an emergency at home. Silence, Robert. Miriam cut him off effortlessly. You were always a weak man, easily blinded by a younger face and sweet words. Do you think I don't know why? My car lost its brakes 6 months ago on the Hudson Parkway. Robert froze. What? Miriam looked at her attorneys. Hand me the report. The senior attorney handed a black folder to Robert. Mr. Langford before Mrs. Langford went into a coma. She had already ordered a private forensic audit of the estate vehicles. The brake lines on her Mercedes were not worn. They were chemically corroded using a specific industrial solvent. Miriam's eyes locked onto Robert with lethal intensity. A solvent manufactured exclusively by a chemical firm owned by Virginia's brother. Robert's breath hitched. He staggered back, clutching the edge of the bed frame. Virginia tried to kill you? She tried to kill us, Beatrice corrected, stepping beside her mother, her posture straight and proud. The crash was meant to take both my life and mother's. They only succeeded in half their plan. And while we were broken in hospital beds, Virginia stripped mother's name from the corporate board and placed Cassandra in my position. And what did you do, Robert? Miriam asked softly, though every word felt like a physical blow. You prepared to hand our life's work to a girl who couldn't manage a lemonade stand, and you tried to force this brilliant young man into a marriage of humiliation. Robert sank into a chair, burying his face in his trembling hands. The weight of his own foolishness and betrayal seemed to crush him entirely. Starting tonight, Miriam declared, her voice echoing in the quiet hospital room, all power of attorney granted to Virginia is revoked. The 51% controlling interest in Langford Enterprises returns to me, and as my first official act. She looked at Lucas and Beatrice, her eyes softening with genuine warmth. I approve the union between Beatrice Langford and Lucas Mercer. The Mercer family's restructuring loan of $200 million will be issued tomorrow morning, not as debt, but as a direct equity partnership between our families. Lucas looked at Beatrice, who offered him a soft, radiant smile. The battle for survival was over. Now it was time for retribution. Over the next 72 hours, the world of New York's high society witnessed a bloodbath. The news of Miriam's miraculous recovery hit the Wall Street Journal, sending Langford Enterprises stock soaring by 30% in a single morning. But while the markets celebrated, the internal halls of the Langford estate were torn apart by federal investigators. Virginia was arrested at her bridge club in the Hamptons. The forensic evidence provided by Miriam's attorneys was airtight. Bank transfers showing large sums paid to an offshore account linked to the mechanic who had serviced Miriam's car, along with text messages between Virginia and her brother discussing the disposal of the primary heirs. Cassandra's world collapsed even faster. Without her mother's backing and stripped of her corporate credit cards, she found herself completely isolated. Her so-called friends in the socialite circle vanished overnight. Worse, Chase, facing a 10-year sentence for grand larceny and accessory to corporate fraud, turned on her in police custody. He handed over voice recordings of Cassandra instructing him to steal Lucas's custom tuxedo, along with evidence that she had been embezzling money from the Langford Charity Foundation to pay for Chase's luxury apartment and sports cars. On Friday morning, Lucas sat in the sunlit study of the Mercer estate, drinking tea with his father, Julian Mercer. Julian looked 10 years younger. The stress that had weighed on his chest for months had vanished. The $200 million partnership with Langford Enterprises had not only saved the Mercer real estate empire, but had instantly made them one of the most powerful developers on the East Coast. Lucas, Julian said, looking at his son with profound pride. Master Alistair sent a package for you this morning. A wooden box rested on the desk. Lucas opened it. Inside lay the original bespoke midnight blue tuxedo, pristine, freshly dry cleaned, and restored to perfection. Beside it was a note from Alistair. A true garment belongs only to its true master. Toby walked into the study, holding a tablet, a grin stretching from ear to ear. Lucas, you won't believe this, Toby laughed. Cassandra is downstairs. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Downstairs? She's been standing outside the security gates for 3 hours, Toby said, shaking his head. She's crying, begging to see you. Her lawyers told her that if you don't drop the civil embezzlement and theft charges, she's facing 5 years in prison. Lucas stood up, adjusting his collar. Let's go take a look. Outside the grand iron gates of the Mercer estate, rain had begun to fall. Cassandra stood in the downpour, her hair soaked, her designer clothes mud-splattered. She looked nothing like the proud, arrogant heiress who had sneered at Lucas at the Plaza Hotel 3 weeks ago. When the iron gate slowly clicked open, her face lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. She rushed forward, grabbing the bars. Lucas! Lucas, please! She sobbed, falling to her knees in the wet gravel. I was wrong. I was manipulated by Chase. He tricked me. He made me do all those awful things. Lucas walked out holding a dark umbrella, Toby standing beside him. Tricked you? Lucas asked quietly, looking down at her through the rain. Did he trick you into slapping Toby across the face? Did he trick you into locking the windows of your car when I was suffocating with a migraine? Did he trick you into calling your sister a cripple? Cassandra wept hysterically, reaching through the iron bars to grab the hem of his trousers. I was stupid, Lucas. I was jealous because I thought you didn't love me. Please. Tell the police you won't prosecute. If I go to prison, my life is over. Lucas stepped back, out of her reach. You didn't care if my family's life was over, Cassandra, Lucas said, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. You didn't care if your own sister spent the rest of her life in a wheelchair. You only care now because the fire has finally reached your own dress. Lucas, I'm your fiancé. We were supposed to be married, she shrieked. My fiancé is currently at the Langford headquarters, presiding over the board meeting as the new managing director, Lucas replied coldly. And in 2 months, she will be my wife. Please, Lucas, have mercy. Lucas turned his back on her. Toby, call security. How he removed for trespassing. With pleasure, Toby smiled, stepping forward with his phone. As Lucas walked back toward the warm lights of his family home, Cassandra's desperate wails faded into the sound of the falling rain. 2 months later, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine was decorated with thousands of white orchids and silver ribbon. The air was filled with the grand, majestic resonance of the pipe organ, echoing off the high stone arches. Every titan of industry, foreign diplomat, and high society family in the country was in attendance. At the front of the altar stood Lucas. He was dressed in the bespoke midnight blue Seville row tuxedo, the flawless silk file lapels catching the warm light of the chandeliers, the cut accentuating his sharp, commanding frame. Beside him stood Toby, looking handsome and proud, in a matching charcoal suit, serving as his best man. The heavy oak doors of the cathedral swung open. The crowd stood up in unison, holding their breath. Walking down the long, red-carpeted aisle, completely unaided, was Beatrice. She wore a gown of hand-embroidered French lace, a shimmering diamond tiara resting upon her dark hair. Her steps were confident, graceful, and perfectly poised. Beside her walked Robert Langford, holding her arm, his face filled with a mixture of profound pride and deep humility. Sitting in the front row, wrapped in a regal velvet shawl, was Miriam Langford, smiling warmly as her daughter walked past. Beatrice reached the altar. She looked up into Lucas's eyes, her own glistening with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. You promised me 13 days, Beatrice whispered softly as she took his hand. And I promised you a lifetime, Lucas replied, a genuine, radiant smile illuminating his face. The cardinal stepped forward, his voice echoing through the sacred hall. We are gathered here today to unite two legendary houses. As the ceremony proceeded, Lucas felt the subtle, warm flow of energy through his fingertips, the same energy that had healed broken nerves, restored lost empires, and rewritten the destiny of two families. He was no longer just the forgotten son of a struggling family. He was the weaver, a master of fate, a healer of wounds, and a man who had claimed his true place at the peak of the world. When the cardinal pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas leaned in and kissed Beatrice. The cathedral erupted into thunderous applause, the sound rising toward the vaulted ceilings like a triumphant storm, declaring to the world that the true heirs had returned, and their reign had just begun.